All right, let's just dive right into this, shall we? Welcome to today's explainer, where we're going to do something a little bit different. We aren't just looking at dry facts today. We are taking a full-on, immersive time travel journey into the deep, ancient past. We're going to explore the Korean peninsula exactly as it was over 2,000 years ago to uncover the secrets of its ancient kingdoms. We'll be looking at their strict laws, their incredibly pragmatic survival tactics, and their deeply held spiritual beliefs. It is going to be a fascinating ride for sure, so get comfortable and let's get started.
So I want to kick things off today with a bit of a mystery for you. Was there a place that even a king couldn't enter? I mean, really think about that for a second. In an era where absolute monarchs literally held the power of life and death over every single one of their subjects, was there actually a sanctuary where their royal authority just stopped? I want you to keep this question in the back of your mind as we go through this explainer, because we are absolutely going to answer it, and the reason why is going to completely change how you view ancient societies.
To really wrap our heads around this, let's try a little thought experiment. Picture this. It's the dead of night. You have suddenly traveled 2 millennia into the past, and you find yourself stepping into a dark, completely unfamiliar Gojoseon village. You are totally out of your element here. But hey, as your enthusiastic tour guide through this strange new world, I'm here to walk you through the whole shebang. You cautiously approach the village entrance, maybe expecting a quiet greeting or even a challenge from a local guard, right?
Well, that brings us to our first stop, Gojoseon and the law of life and property. Because the very first thing you'd experience stepping into this village is a strict, undeniable cultural warning. Never, ever steal another person's belongings. And the consequences for breaking that rule, they were completely life-altering. Now, what's really interesting about this number 500,000 jeon is what it actually represented. If you stole in Gojoseon, you didn't just get a slap on the wrist or spend time in a jail cell. No way. You were forced to become the slave of your victim. If you absolutely refused that slavery, you had exactly one way out, paying a fine of 500,000 jeon. In that era, this was an astronomical, practically impossible amount of money. An ordinary person could literally save every single penny for their entire life and still not even come close to gathering 500,000 jeon. So it was a rule specifically designed to make the very thought of stealing absolutely terrifying. And this incredibly harsh rule was part of Gojoseon's famous 8-article law. Now, unfortunately, over the centuries, 5 of these laws were completely lost to time. We just don't know what they were. It's kind of like a giant puzzle missing half its pieces. But the 3 surviving rules brilliantly illustrate this ancient society's ultimate focus. Check it out. If you murder, it results in the death penalty. If you injure someone, you must compensate them with grain. And theft results in slavery or that impossible fine we just talked about. When we look at these 3 together, a crystal clear picture emerges. This wasn't some lawless, chaotic Wild West. This was a highly structured society that fiercely protected life, property, and strict social order above all else. Okay, moving right along to our next stop, Buyeo and Okjeo, in Marrying for Survival. We're traveling geographically now, up to the northern kingdom of Buyeo and the coastal kingdom of Okjeo, to witness some marriage customs that might honestly seem pretty shocking to our modern eyes. But remember, we have to look at their world through their lens, not ours. Today, we mostly view marriage through the lens of romance, love, and personal fulfillment. But in these harsh ancient kingdoms, marriage was driven by pure survival, economic safety, and the protection of the family unit. We've got to completely reframe our perspective here. Ancient marriages were definitely not romantic fairy tales. They were highly practical safety nets. In a world where one bad winter or a sudden conflict could literally mean starvation, marriage was a deeply calculated strategy just to keep the family lineage alive. And that brings us to a very specific custom in Buyeo known as Levirate marriage. This was a system where a younger brother would marry his deceased older brother's widow. So if a man passed away, his younger brother would immediately step in and take her hand. To us today, that sounds incredibly strange, right? But in a brutal era where a widowed woman and her kids would struggle to physically survive on their own, this was a harsh but completely necessary strategy. It ensured that the widow, the children, and the family's vital assets were all protected. It wasn't about romance at all. It was about fierce family responsibility. Meanwhile, over on the coast in Okjeo, they practiced an arranged child marriage custom known as Minmunorije. Basically, a young girl would leave her parents and be raised in her future husband's home until adulthood, at which point they'd officially marry. So the crucial point here is how this acted as a highly realistic economic and social solution. It drastically reduced the heavy financial burden of a traditional wedding, and it allowed those 2 families to build deep, unbreakable bonds from a very early age. It was basically a brilliant survival tactic, hidden perfectly inside a cultural tradition.
All right, let's step away from the harsh realities of law and survival for a minute for our final stop, ancient festivals and the sacred zone. Imagine the crisp autumn air. The exhausting, arduous harvest is finally over, and suddenly, the villages just erupt with the rhythmic pounding of drums. You are witnessing the absolute power of community and faith.
If you look across the different kingdoms, you'll see they each had their own unique way to celebrate. Up in Buyeo, they had the Yongo festival, in Goguryeo, the Dongmeng, in Dongye, the Mucheon. While the names varied, they all shared one incredibly powerful tradition: thanking the heavens. You see, to these ancient people, the heavens weren't just the sky or the weather. The heavens represented a massive, supreme force that actively protected their lives and granted them the food they desperately needed to survive. And during these festivals, the strict social hierarchy just melted away. Kings and commoners danced, ate, and drank together, totally united by their shared gratitude.
And it's exactly this intense, shared faith that perfectly answers the mystery we set up at the very beginning. Let's resolve that hook right now. Was there actually a place a king couldn't enter? Yes, absolutely. It was called Sodo. This was a highly sacred space built right in the center of Sanhan villages. It was considered so holy that if a criminal fled into the Sodo, they were granted absolute asylum. They could not be dragged out. Even the king's own royal officials were strictly forbidden from crossing its threshold. This brilliantly illustrates a time when faith and spiritual reverence temporarily overpowered even absolute royal authority. It was a truly untouchable sanctuary.
The oldest record of life. As we snap our time machine back to the present day, I really want you to reflect on what we've uncovered here. It is so easy to fall into the trap of thinking ancient people were primitive or simplistic, but they weren't. They were just like us. They created complex legal systems to protect their property, they devised intricate social customs to ensure their families survived harsh realities, and they built profound spiritual communities to find meaning and connection. This isn't just dry history. It's the oldest record of human life, and it's remarkably sophisticated.
I want to leave you with this really powerful quote directly from our source material. Old history isn't a dusty tale, but the oldest record of life quietly speaking to us today. Isn't that a beautiful way to look at it? When we brush away the dust of 2,000 years, we don't find primitive strangers. We find our own reflection. People just trying to protect each other, survive, and make sense of their world. So, my final question to you is this. If our ancestors' survival strategies still speak to us so clearly today, what will our modern records of life say to the time travelers of the future? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep exploring.